We've all heard about the witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts during 1692. But were those the first witch trials in North America? Some of you might be surprised to hear no, they weren't. Hi everyone, my name is Mia Moon and welcome to the Moon Coven. Today we'll be discussing the first witch trials in North America that occurred 30 years before Salem. We're going to be discussing the witch panic in Connecticut. Now, the first witch trials that we are going to discuss in Connecticut occurred in Hartford, and they occurred from 1647 to 1663. Now, it's really hard to piece together exactly what happened in Connecticut during this time because documentation was very poor. A lot of the trials and a lot of the testimony were not recorded. But in these Hartford trials, it's safe to assume that they heard about 37 cases, which sadly resulted in 11 executions. Now, the first woman that was accused of witchcraft in Hartford, her name was Elise Young. Now, like I said before, records are sparse and really scarce. And in some records, she's referred to as Alice Young or Acacia Young. So we really don't know exactly how to pronounce her name or what was her name. And this was a common occurrence in New England during these trials because you have to remember a lot of people didn't know how to read or write. So when they were be asked their name and asked how to spell it, they weren't quite sure. So a lot of that was open to interpretation. But for the sake of this video, we're going to address her as Elise Young. Now, Elise was born in 1615 in England, and she settled in Connecticut around the 1630s. Her and her husband, John Young, bought a small plot of land somewhere around 1641, but then she kind of disappears from all records. After that, the only records that we really have of her and her husband was notes from a physician. Now, she did have a daughter who was also accused of witchcraft. Her daughter Alice was accused of witchcraft in Massachusetts 30 years later, but she was never executed. Now, like I said before, there are no records of her trial, which is crazy when you think about it, that someone would be put on trial and executed and there are no written records. Strangely enough, around the same time, there was an influenza outbreak. Now, this outbreak affected rich people and poor people, but obviously people that had money had more access to medical care and more access to resources. And there are rumors that within their own class, the wealthy started to point the finger at others in efforts to take their resources. Either way, she was executed at the Old State House on May 26 of 1647, and she was just 32 years old. Now let's move on to Mary Johnson. Now, Mary Johnson is the first recorded confession of witchcraft in Hartford. Now, from what we know of Mary, she was an indentured servant. She was a servant in a household and had been accused of theft. And after brutal interrogation and brutal questioning, she finally confessed of having familiar relations with the devil. She confessed to having a lot of relations with devils. She also confessed of unaliving a child, but I couldn't find any real records about that. Now, her execution was delayed because she was pregnant at the time of her interrogation. So she was imprisoned until she gave birth to her baby and then was executed June 6 of 1650. Now let's talk about the Harrisons, specifically Catherine Harrison. Now, Catherine came over from England to Connecticut around 1651, and she became very wealthy after she inherited her husband's estate. And we all know these Puritans with women owning property. Naughty. Now, she suffered some legal troubles here and there. She was sued by another woman because apparently Catherine was slandering her. But somewhere between 1668 and 1669, she was accused of witchcraft. We do have documentation on what she was accused of. She was accused of not honoring the Sabbath. She was accused of black magic and of fortune telling. And of course, the old appearing in spectral forms to people. You know, that old chestnut. She was also accused of calling to the devil while standing in the swamp. Now, her trial was quite interesting because she faced all kinds of problems and the first jury could not reach a decision. So they retry her, and then the second jury finds her guilty. But surprisingly enough, the magistrate at the time steps in and says, this evidence seems a little shaky. There's really nothing concrete. All we have are spectral evidence from the accuser. So in May of 1670, she was let out of jail, but she was banished from the Connecticut colony. We kind of lose track of her a little bit, but it says that her and her family moved to New York. But that's really rare. From a lot of the research that I've done, it's very, very odd that a magistrate will step in and say the jury got it wrong and set a woman free. So I wonder what went on there. Who knows, right? Now, of course, those are just 3 cases of witchcraft in Hartford. There were obviously more people that were accused, imprisoned, and executed. And unfortunately, it wasn't the only place in Connecticut where this took place. In the next video, we will dive a little bit more into the Connecticut witch trials and everything that happened in Wethersfield, Connecticut. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that you're enjoying this series during spooky season. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them in the comment section, and I will see you on the next one.